The great hall of the alien palace was filled with silence. The Emperor of the Veiled Dominion sat high upon his black throne, his eyes cold and sharp like burning steel. Around him, servants and nobles bowed low, afraid to even breathe too loud. Before him stood 3 young women, his daughters. Each carried the same proud crest on their foreheads, the mark of royal blood. But their heads were lowered, their hands trembling. They knew their father's anger was dangerous, like a fire that never stopped burning. The Emperor's voice cut through the silence. "You have shamed me," he growled. His words echoed against the walls, heavy as stone. The eldest daughter lifted her head. She was tall, with calm eyes, but even her voice shook. "Father, we only showed kindness. The humans were prisoners, yes, but they were starving. We gave them food." The hall trembled as the Emperor slammed his fist on the armrest of his throne. "Kindness?" His voice rose like thunder. "Humans are not worthy of kindness. They are rebels, enemies of our empire. And you, daughters of the Emperor, you fed them like they were your equals." The younger sisters flinched at his rage. One of them whispered, almost too soft to hear, "But they looked at us with fear, not hate. They were so weak. Enough." The Emperor roared. His cloak flared as he rose from his throne. "You are not weak children. You are Veil royalty. But you have forgotten your blood. If you will not act as daughters of the Emperor, then you will be reshaped." The sisters gasped. They knew what reshaped meant. Everyone in the Empire knew. Those sent for re-education never returned the same. The halls of discipline were dark, cruel, and endless. Minds broke there. Souls bent until nothing was left but obedience. One of the daughters fell to her knees. "Father, please." "We only silence." His hand rose, and the guards stepped forward. Their armor clinked as they surrounded the princesses. Each guard carried an energy staff, and their eyes were as cold as the Emperor's. The eldest tried to remain strong. Her voice shook, but her chin lifted. "If you do this, Father, we will not return as daughters. We will return as shadows." The Emperor's lip curled into a cruel smile. Better shadows than traitors. The nobles in the hall lowered their heads, afraid to meet the princess's eyes. No one dared to speak against the Emperor. His word was law. His anger was death. The sisters were dragged away, their feet scraping against the polished floor. They wanted to resist, to scream, but fear chained their voices. As the heavy doors closed behind them, the youngest looked back one last time. Her father's gaze followed her, not with love, but with something darker. The journey was long. They were taken from the palace in a sealed transport ship, locked behind thick metal doors. The hum of engines filled the silence. None of the daughters spoke. Their hands were bound, and their hearts pounded with dread. Hours passed before the ship finally slowed. The metal doors hissed open, and blinding light poured in. The sisters squinted, expecting the cold halls of re-education, expecting chains and whips. But what they saw was not what they imagined. They were standing on soil earth, not steel. Around them were strange structures, simple but strong. And before them stood not Veil instructors, but humans. The eldest froze. This is not the re-education halls." The guards pushed them forward. One of the humans stepped out from the group. He was tall, with worn armor and tired eyes, but there was no cruelty in his face. He studied the sisters, then looked at the Veil guards. The Emperor ordered their re-education. The human leader said slowly. His voice was firm but calm. "We will take it from here." The daughters exchanged terrified glances. Their father had given them to humans, the very enemies he hated most. The guards left without another word, leaving the princesses behind. The heavy doors of the ship slammed shut, and soon the sound of engines faded into the distance. The sisters were alone. With humans. The human leader finally spoke again, his eyes steady on them. Your father believes we will break you. He thinks we will twist you into what he wants." The sisters trembled. One of them whispered, Isn't that why we are here?" But the human shook his head. Slowly, he stepped closer, and his words cut through the heavy silence like a blade. "No, we will not break you. We will show you the truth." The princesses froze. Their hearts raced. Nothing made sense anymore. The emperor wanted them crushed into obedience. But here they stood, in the hands of their enemies. And for the first time, they felt fear and confusion mixed with something else, something dangerous. Hope. The princesses had been raised in golden halls, under the shadow of their father's throne. They had eaten rare fruits, worn gowns stitched with silver thread, and looked down on all other life as lesser. But tonight was different. The heavy ship that delivered them to the humans was gone, its engines echoing in the distance like fading thunder. All that remained were the three daughters royalty of the Veil Empire standing in chains, before a group of men and women who should have hated them. The eldest daughter, Soraya, stared at the human leader. His face was rough, his hair cut short, his armor scratched from battles. Yet those eyes were steady, not cruel. She expected mockery or violence, but instead, he simply nodded to his people. "Untie them," he said. The humans hesitated, then moved forward. The princesses tensed as rough hands touched their wrists. Chains fell away. The youngest daughter, Leora, rubbed her skin where the cuffs had bitten deep. She whispered, trembling, "Why would they free us?" The middle sister, Vera, hissed, "Back, it is a trick, don't trust them." But Soraya stayed silent. She kept her eyes on the human leader, trying to read his expression. He gave no answers, only motion for them to follow. The humans led them into a structure made of stone and wood, nothing like the shining palaces of the Veil. Inside, the air was warm. Light flickered from fire lamps. A long table was set with food, bread, fruits, and steaming bowls that carried strange smells. The sisters froze. "Sit," the human leader ordered. They did not move. Vera clenched her jaw. "This is not food. This is poison. You wish to see us crawl." A faint smile touched the man's lips. He reached out, tore a piece of bread, and ate it in front of them. Then he swallowed, his eyes never leaving theirs. "Not poison, food, eat or starve. The choice is yours." The silence stretched. Finally, the youngest, Leora, could not resist. Hunger gnawed at her bones. She took a piece of bread, her fingers trembling, and bit into it. Her eyes widened. It was soft, warm, real. Tears stung her eyes as she chewed. The others stared at her. Soraya, after a long pause, followed. The taste was plain, nothing like the sweet dishes of the palace, but it filled her with warmth she hadn't expected. Vera resisted until her stomach betrayed her, growling loud enough to make the humans chuckle. With burning cheeks, she grabbed her share. For the first time in days, the daughters ate until their hands slowed, until their bodies stopped shaking. But peace did not last. That night, when the food was gone, the humans showed them to a chamber. 3 beds waited, with soft sheets and blankets. The sisters stood at the doorway, stunned. Beds, real beds. Not cages, not cold floors. "Rest," the leader said simply. "No one will harm you here." He left without another word, closing the door behind him. The 3 princesses stared at each other. "This is madness," Vera whispered. "Humans are supposed to be beasts, yet they feed us. They give us beds. Why?" Soraya sat slowly on one of the mattresses. The fabric gave under her weight. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "I don't know. But Father sent us here to be broken. Instead, I think, we are being studied." Leora pulled the blanket close, her small voice trembling. "They don't look at us like prisoners, not like Father's guards did. They look at us like people." The sisters fell silent. The only sound was the soft crackle of fire outside, but Soraya could not sleep. Long into the night, she sat awake, staring at the wooden walls. Something about the humans unsettled her more than her father's punishments ever had. Cruelty she could understand. But this kindness from enemies was dangerous. It gnawed at her, breaking the wall she had built around her heart. Hours passed before the door creaked open. A shadow entered, the human leader again. He stood silently, his hand resting on the doorway. His eyes moved over the sisters, then settled on Soraya. She rose to her feet, her body tense. "Why are we here? What do you want from us?" The man stepped closer, the firelight casting his features in sharp relief. His voice was low, steady. "Your father believes we will shape you into loyal heirs for him. That we will harden you, break you, and send you back as tools of his empire." Soraya swallowed hard. "Isn't that what you plan to do?" He shook his head. His eyes narrowed, and for the first time, his voice carried heat. Double quotes, "No, we are not here to make you loyal to him. We are here to show you something your father fears most." Her breath caught. "And what is that?" The human leaned forward. His words were sharp, but quiet, like a blade pressed against her throat. The truth of humanity. The room felt colder. The other sisters sat up in their beds, wide-eyed. None of them understood what he meant, but his voice carried weight, a promise that their lives would never be the same again. Soraya's heart pounded. For the first time, she realized the true danger wasn't chains or whips. It was this strange, unshakable calm in the face of fear. Humanity wasn't breaking them through pain. Humanity was breaking them with something far worse. Hope. The next morning, the sisters awoke to the sound of footsteps outside their chamber. Sunlight spilled through a narrow window, strange and golden compared to the artificial light of the palace. They had slept, but their dreams were restless, filled with their father's angry face and the steady eyes of the human commander. The door opened, and two humans entered. One was the same commander from last night. The other carried a small bowl, steaming with food. But it was not placed before the princesses. Instead, a child stepped into the room behind them. The sisters froze. The child was thin, bones sharp. Beneath her skin, eyes wide with hunger. She wore patched clothes, her tiny hands trembling as she clutched her stomach. The human commander placed the bowl of food on the ground between the princesses and the child. His voice was calm, but there was weight behind it. "Today, you will make a choice. Either you, or she does." The sisters stiffened. Soraya, the eldest, felt her chest tighten. This was not a punishment of pain, it was worse. It was a test. Vera stepped forward first, anger burning in her eyes. "What trick is this? Do you want us to beg for scraps? Do you want us to lower ourselves before a human child?" The commander didn't flinch. "No, I want to see who you truly are when no one orders you what to do." The child stared at the food, lips trembling. She did not speak, but her hunger filled the room louder than words. Leora, the youngest princess, felt her heart ache. She remembered sneaking food to starving prisoners in her father's palace. The fear, the shame, and the tiny spark of relief when they smiled through broken teeth. Her hand trembled as she reached for the bowl. Vera slapped her wrist. "Don't be a fool. If we give them this, they'll think us weak." Soraya stood between them. Her voice was low. "Weak or strong? In a way father never taught us." Vera glared at her, but Soraya's eyes were fixed on the child. Slowly, she bent down, lifted the bowl, and placed it in the girl's hands. The child gasped. Her tiny fingers gripped the food like it was treasure. She ate fast, afraid it might be taken away. The sisters watched in silence, emotions twisting in their chests. When the bowl was empty, the human commander spoke again. "You passed." Vera's eyes widened. "Passed? What kind of test was this?" The human's gaze sharpened. "Your father ordered us to break you. But what he does not understand is that mercy is harder than cruelty. Kindness takes strength. And you chose it even when it cost you. The sisters were stunned. No one in the palace had ever spoken like this. Their father taught that strength was domination, that mercy was weakness. But here, humans spoke of kindness as power. The commander leaned closer, his voice quieter now, almost dangerous. Your father wants heirs who will rule with an iron hand. But tell me, what happens when his daughters learn a power he does not understand? Saraya's heart pounded. She wanted to answer, but the words died in her throat. That night, the sisters whispered to each other in the dark. Vera paced the floor, restless. They are playing games with us, twisting our minds. Father was right, humans are dangerous. Leora clutched her blanket, her eyes shining in the firelight. But didn't you see the child's face? She looked at us like we were saviors. Not monsters, for once. I felt like more than Father's shadow. Saraya stayed quiet the longest. Then she spoke, her voice steady. Father sent us here to be broken. But I think maybe he feared this more than chains or pain. That we would see a side of humanity that cannot be erased. Her words hung heavy in the air. None of them slept easily. The next day, another test awaited them. This time, the humans brought them outside, where fields stretched under the sky. Villagers worked with their hands, building, farming, living. The sisters had never seen rulers and commoners working side by side. The commander pointed to the soil. You will help. Dig, carry, sweat like the rest. Or you may stand aside and watch. The choice is yours. The princesses stared at the tools. Their soft hands had never known labor. Vera spat on the ground. We are daughters of the emperor. We do not dig dirt. But Saraya's gaze lingered on the humans. They worked together, laughing despite the heat, sharing water, lifting heavy loads side by side. None bowed to another. No whips cracked above them. They moved not out of fear but choice. Slowly, she picked up a tool. The weight shocked her arms, but she forced herself to strike the ground. Sweat broke on her brow. The humans nodded in approval. Leora, after a moment, joined her. Vera cursed it under her breath, but at last she too lifted a tool, refusing to be left behind. By the time the sun set, their arms ached, their hands were blistered, and their bodies felt heavier than stone. Yet for the first time, they looked at one another with a strange fire in their eyes. Not shame, not weakness. Something else. Saraya whispered as they collapsed onto their beds that night. Father wanted us to learn obedience. But I think we are learning freedom. Asterisk, the nights in the human settlement were too quiet. No guards marching, no servants whispering orders, no heavy boots echoing down palace halls. Only the soft sound of fire crackling and the faint murmur of people talking under the stars. The princesses could not sleep. Their bodies were tired from work in the fields, but their minds were restless. Saraya lay awake, her eyes tracing the wooden beams above her bed. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the starving child's face. She saw the humans sweating in the sun, laughing together as equals. The image clashed with everything her father had ever taught. Beside her, Leora shifted under her blanket. Sister, are we still his daughters? Or are we becoming something else? Vera turned sharply. Don't speak such words. We are Veil, our blood is royal. These humans are clever liars. They feed us, they smile at us, but it is only to twist us. Don't you see? Father was right. But her voice shook, and even she sounded unsure. At that moment, the door creaked open. All three sisters sat up, their hearts racing. A shadow slipped into the room. It was not the human commander. It was another human, a young woman carrying a small lamp. Quiet, she whispered. I am not supposed to be here. The sisters exchanged sharp glances. Saraya asked carefully, Who are you? The woman set the lamp down, her eyes darting to the door. My name is Ilara. I came because you must hear the truth. Vera narrowed her eyes. The truth? Another lesson? Another test? Ilara shook. Her head, her voice trembled. No, the commander doesn't want you to know this, not yet. But you must understand what your father has done. The sisters leaned closer despite themselves. Ilara whispered, Your father's empire does not only enslave humans. It burns worlds. Entire colonies ours, others, even species loyal to him. If a planet shows weakness, he orders it destroyed. He calls it cleansing. We call it murder. Liara gasped, covering her mouth. She had heard rumors of wars, but never details. Soraya's heart pounded. You mean, father lied to us? Ilara's eyes glistened in the dim light. He lied to everyone, but he fears something more than rebellion. He fears you. The sisters froze. Vera whispered, Us? Why? Ilara leaned closer, her words sharp as a blade. Because if the Emperor's own daughters choose another path, if you stand with humanity, his empire will tremble. No throne can stand when its heirs reject it. The words sank deep into the room. The sisters stared at each other, stunned. But before they could reply, heavy footsteps echoed outside. Ilara's eyes widened. She blew out the lamp and vanished through a hidden gap in the wall. The sisters scrambled back into their beds just as the door opened again. The human commander entered, carrying a torch. His eyes swept the room, sharp, searching. You are awake, he said flatly. Soraya sat up slowly. We could not sleep. The commander's gaze lingered on them. For a moment, Soraya thought he knew about Ilara, but he said nothing. He placed the torch in its holder and turned to leave. Before he closed the door, he spoke one sentence that chilled them more than the night air. Be careful what whispers you listen to. Not every truth is safe. The door shut. Darkness swallowed them again. The sisters lay in silence, their hearts pounding. Finally, Liora whispered, Did you hear her? Father burns worlds, and he fears us. Vera covered her ears, shaking her head. Lies, all of it. Humans will say anything to turn us against him. But her voice cracked. Soraya's eyes burned in the dark. She wanted to believe Vera, but deep down, she remembered the fear in the child's eyes, the joy of the villagers working side by side, and the calm certainty in Ilara's words. She whispered to herself, so quiet her sisters almost didn't. Here, if Father truly fears us, then maybe humanity has given us more than food and beds. Maybe they have given us a choice. The next day, the commander summoned them again, but this time the tests were harsher. Not of hunger or labor, but of loyalty. A human prisoner was dragged forward, accused of stealing rations. The commander placed a blade in Soraya's hands. Your father would have you punish thieves without mercy. What will you do? The blade felt heavy, colder than iron. Soraya looked at the man kneeling before her, then at her sisters, then at the human crowd. Waiting silently. Her hand shook. This was no longer about obedience to her father. This was about who she was becoming. The blade slipped from Soraya's hand. It struck the ground with a dull thud, the sound echoing through the courtyard. All eyes turned to her, the human prisoner waiting for punishment, the villagers, her sisters, and the human commander. Chest heaved. Her father's voice still thundered in her mind. Mercy is weakness. Obedience is strength. But the prisoner's trembling eyes reminded her of the starving child. Humanity was not weakness. It was survival. I will not kill him, she whispered. Gasps spread through the crowd. Vera clenched her fists, torn between rage and fear. Sister, you defy Father's command. But Soraya stood firm. The commander's eyes flickered with something unreadable, approval, perhaps, or caution. He signaled, and the prisoner was released. That night, the sisters lay in silence, the weight of Soraya's choice pressing down like stone. None dared to speak of it, but something had shifted. Later, as the moon climbed high, Saraya rose from her bed. Sleep would not come. Her mind burned with questions, and her chest tightened with a strange, dangerous longing. She left the chamber. Quietly, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor, the settlement was hushed. Only the watch fires glowed, throwing sparks into the night sky. And there, standing at the edge of the camp, was the human commander, alone. Saraya's steps slowed. Her throat tightened. She told herself to turn back, but her feet carried her forward. He did not move when she approached. Only his eyes shifted toward her, steady as always. "You should be asleep," he said. "So should you," she answered. Silence. Stretched between them, filled only by the crackle of the fire and the hum of the night. For the first time, Saraya dared to study his face closely. The lines of weariness, the faint scar on his jaw, the way his eyes seemed older than his body. He was nothing like the nobles of her father's court, who draped themselves in silks and cruelty. He was real. "Why do you do this?" she asked softly. "Why treat us with mercy when you should hate us?" The commander's jaw tightened. He stared into the fire. "Because hate builds empires like your father's, but mercy builds something that lasts longer. Something he fears." Saraya's chest tightened. The words hit deeper than she wanted them to. "And if father knew how you treated us?" she pressed. "If he knew the bond you build?" His eyes shifted to her again, sharp as blades. "Then he would kill us both." The air thickened. Saraya's breath caught in her throat. She should have stepped back, but instead she stepped closer. Close enough to feel the warmth of the fire on both their faces. Her voice lowered. "Then why risk it?" For a long moment he did not answer. Then, in a voice quiet enough that only she could hear, he said, "Because I see something in you that is not your father." Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not as a princess, not as a tool of empire, but as herself. Before she could reply, footsteps sounded behind her. Vera's voice, sharp as a knife, cut the air. "Sister." Saraya turned, guilt rushing through her like fire. Vera stood in the shadows, her eyes burning with accusation. "You would betray our father for him?" Vera spat. Saraya's voice faltered. "It is not betrayal, it is weakness," Vera hissed. "Can you not see? They are using us, and you would give them what father most fears." The commander stepped forward, his voice steady but dangerous. "Enough. You should not be here." Vera glared at him, then at Saraya. "If father knew what I have seen tonight." She let the words hang, heavy with threat. Saraya's hands trembled. She wanted to scream, to beg her sister to understand. But Vera turned and vanished into the dark, leaving only silence and the crackling of fire. Saraya stood frozen. The commander's eyes lingered on her, unreadable again. Finally he said quietly, "You must be careful. Bonds like this, they can burn everything." Saraya swallowed hard. "Then why does it feel like I've been waiting my whole life for it?" The commander did not answer. He turned away, leaving her with the firelight and the storm in her chest. Back in the chamber, Leora stirred as Saraya slipped into bed. The youngest whispered sleepily, "Where were you?" Saraya stared at the ceiling, her heart pounding, her lips pressed shut. She could not answer, but deep inside, she knew the truth. Something forbidden had begun tonight. Something her father would never forgive. Something that could either save them or destroy them all. The Emperor's throne. Room had never been so silent. The air itself seemed to tremble as he sat on his black throne, eyes blazing like suns ready to burn. His daughters stood before him, their heads unbowed, their bodies changed by months among the humans. The hall was crowded. Nobles, guards, and generals pressed close, waiting to hear how the Emperor would judge his own blood. At first, no one spoke. The silence was a blade, sharp and endless. Then the Emperor rose. "I sent you to be reshaped," he thundered. his voice shaking the walls. I sent you to return as daughters of the Veil, cleansed of weakness, and yet. His eyes narrowed, scanning them like predators scan prey. What stands before me is not mine, not anymore. The nobles gasped. Whispers filled the air. Like snakes hissing in the dark, Soraya lifted her chin, her voice steady. You sent us to be broken, Father. But instead, we found strength. Strength? The Emperor spat. You stink of humanity. I can see it in your eyes, hear it in your voices. Tell me, daughters of shame, what have they done to you? The youngest, Leora, stepped forward before fear could silence her. Her voice was soft, but clear enough to carry through the throne room. They showed us mercy. They gave us freedom. They taught us that strength is not in cruelty, but in love. The nobles erupted into outrage, voices clashing in disbelief. Guards tightened their grips on their weapons. The Emperor raised a single hand, and silence fell again. His eyes burned into Leora's, then into Soraya's, then into Vera's. For a long, terrible moment, he said nothing. Then his gaze dropped lower, and he froze. The hall seemed to tilt, the air heavy with shock. Soraya's hand rested on her stomach, a subtle curve, hidden beneath folds of her robe. Leora's figure, too, carried the same secret. Even Vera, who had denied it longest, stood stiff, her face pale but her body betraying her. The Emperor's voice cracked like lightning. No! His chest heaved, his rage twisting into something darker. You dare return not as heirs, but as carriers of the enemy? Gasps filled the throne room. The nobles' faces shifted from horror to disbelief, then to fear. The Emperor's daughters were not just changed. They were pregnant. The Emperor's hand gripped his throne until the metal bent. His roar shook the chamber. This is treachery beyond treachery, you, my own blood. You have poisoned the royal line with filth. Soraya did not flinch. Her voice was calm, though her heart hammered inside her chest. No, Father. We have given the royal line something you cannot destroy, humanity. The words struck harder than any blade. Nobles staggered as if the air had been ripped from their lungs. You shame me before my court, the Emperor bellowed. His cloak flared as he stepped down from his throne. I should strike you down where you stand, all of you, and end this stain with my own hands. His guards shifted, waiting for the order. Blades glinted in the torchlight, but the daughters stood firm. For the first time they looked not like prisoners, not like trembling children, but like something more. Leora's voice trembled but did not break. If you kill us, Father, the nobles will see. They will whisper. They will ask, why does the Emperor fear his own daughters so much? The Emperor froze, his rage colliding with his paranoia. Around him, nobles exchanged uneasy looks. Some eyes held disgust, but others held curiosity. The seed of doubt had been planted. Soraya stepped closer, her voice steady, strong. You taught us that obedience makes strength. But we learned something greater. That love, mercy, and unity make us stronger than fear ever could. And now, that strength grows inside us. The Emperor's face twisted in fury. Silence, he roared. But his voice cracked, not with power, but with something rare in him, fear. Because deep down, he knew the truth. No matter how many whips cracked, no matter how many planets burned, he could not erase what his daughters carried. Humanity was in them now. Humanity was in his bloodline. The hall erupted into chaos. Some nobles shouted for their execution. Others begged the Emperor to think. The guards tightened their circle, weapons raised, but the daughters did not bow. They stood tall, fire in their eyes, and in that moment, the Emperor saw something that chilled him more than any rebellion, any war. He saw defiance wrapped in love. He saw a future where his empire's heirs were not his alone, a future where humanity had already won. The throne room shook with chaos. Nobles shouted, guards shifted uneasily, and the emperor's roar thundered above them all. But through the storm, his daughters stood calm, their hands resting on their bellies, symbols of a truth he could not erase. The emperor's eyes blazed with fury. His voice cracked like a whip. You dare defile my bloodline with human filth. You will be erased from history. Tonight, your names will be ashes. His guards stepped forward, blades gleaming, ready to strike. The nobles pressed back, torn between fear of their emperor and fear of what they were witnessing. But Saraya, the eldest, raised her voice, clear, steady, unbroken. Strike us down if you must, Father. But you cannot strike down what is already inside us. Even if we die, humanity lives on inside your heirs. The words cut deeper than steel. The nobles froze. Even the guards hesitated. The emperor's face twisted. Rage battled against something worse, doubt. His empire had been built on obedience, on fear, on the belief that his blood was pure and unbreakable. Yet here, before the eyes of his court, his daughters carried proof that his empire's walls had already cracked. Vera, the sister who had resisted the humans the longest, finally stepped forward. Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. All my life, I believed strength was fear, that cruelty kept us safe. But when I lived among humans, I saw something greater. They fight not because they are ordered, but because they choose. That is strength Father will never understand. Gasps spread through the hall. Some nobles whispered to each other, their faces pale. Others looked away, afraid to meet the emperor's eyes. The emperor's hands clenched into fists. He raised his arm to order their execution. But then he saw hesitation in his guards' eyes. Not all of them moved forward. Some glanced at the daughters, then at their own families standing in the crowd. The doubt was spreading faster. Then fear. Leora, the youngest, stepped beside her sisters. Her voice was soft but carried through the chamber like a bell. Father, you can kill us, but the truth will outlive you. Humanity has already changed us. And if it can change us, your heirs, then it can change your empire. The words echoed. In that silence, the emperor finally saw it, the nobles shifting. The guards hesitating, the cracks spreading through the foundation of his throne. He roared in rage, but this time, his voice did not silence the chamber. It sounded desperate, hollow. The daughters stood tall together. Saraya raised her hand. Not in defiance, but in declaration. We are no longer only daughters of the emperor. We are daughters of two bloods. And one day, our children will be more than heirs to your empire. They will be mothers and fathers of something greater. A future where no throne, no whip, no fear can stand. Her words struck like lightning. The nobles erupted, some shouting curses, others whispering prayers. The guards looked at one another, their weapons shaking. And for the first time in his reign, the emperor felt it. Not victory, not control, but the weight of fear. He stepped back, his cloak dragging like shadows around him. His voice was lower, now broken by something he could not hide. You have doomed us all. Saraya's eyes did not leave his. No, Father. We have saved what you tried to destroy. The emperor collapsed back onto his throne, his chest heaving. He tried to command, but his words fell flat. No one moved. No one obeyed. His empire, once absolute, now trembled because three daughters had chosen something he could never understand. The sisters turned and walked out of the hall, their steps steady, their heads high. The guards did not stop them. The nobles parted. Before them, fear and awe in their eyes. Outside, under the burning sky, the people of the capital gathered. When they saw the princesses, whispers rippled through the crowd. Not whispers of shame, but of wonder. One voice murmured, "Mothers of something new." The sisters felt the weight of every eye upon them, yet for the first time, they did not feel alone. Inside them, A new future grew, one not chained to the Emperor's throne, but carried forward by humanity's fire. That night, as they stood together on the palace balcony, Soraya spoke softly to her sisters. He thought sending us away would break us. Instead, he gave us to those who showed us a strength beyond fear. And now, his empire fears us more than his enemies ever did. Vera placed a hand over her heart, finally at peace. We are no longer just daughters. We are something more. Leora smiled faintly, her hand resting on her stomach. We are mothers of humanity. And as the stars shone above, the empire shifted. Whispers of rebellion carried through the night, whispers the Emperor could not silence. Humanity had entered his bloodline. Humanity had entered his empire, and nothing could erase it.